the plague, gonna kill you in a few days. A pandemic so severe, Black Death caused such horror and fear, and there ain't no cure for that, girl. You'll be dead in no time flat, girl.
From 1347 to 1352, Europe was devastated by a bubonic plague known as the Black Death. Rats carrying fleas that contained bacteria spread throughout Europe by way of merchant ships and ultimately killed about one-third of the population. A portion of Europe, however, was able to survive and enjoy economic prosperity due to the opportunities the plague created for them. The beginnings of the Black Death were during a time of an increased food supply which resulted in overpopulation. There were soon more people than the food supply could provide for, leading to food shortages and extreme hunger and resulting in sickness and bad health, making people vulnerable to the disease. People quickly attempted to defend or cure themselves from the plague. People wore aromatic amulets, took urine baths, or even took it to higher extremes by acting as a flagellant. Flagellants would self-harm to seek penance from God. Their bloodletting, however, actually could have contributed even more to its spread. The most successful way of avoiding the plague was flight and seclusion. The main social change was massive depopulation and smaller labor supply that resulted. With population decline came declines in the farming industry as well. As a result, the wages of farmers increased since there were fewer, but agricultural prices fell since the demand for products fell. Skilled artisans gained power and economic prosperity as the demand for their skills rose. Another party which experienced economic prosperity was the Catholic Church, as there was an increased demand for church services for the dead or dying. The church was also the source of religious and political decline during the Black Death. As the Black Death affected Christians and more specifically clergy members, people began to lose trust in the church, leading to weakened political power. The Renaissance era began in Italy around 1375 and extended to 1527, and it marked the shift from medieval civilization to a modern era of rebirth and rediscovery. Socially, education was reborn as the study of classical Latin and Greek texts was studied in a new study known as humanism. The intent was to bring back the respected norms and values of ancient times in a liberal arts program. Additionally, art flourished, with notable artists being Giotto, Donatello, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, and more. Economically, the agricultural economy shifted to an urban economy. In the Middle Ages, feudalism was common. The beginnings of capitalism and organized commerce in Italian city-states took place in the Renaissance. Politically and religiously, there was a shift from a state where the church was politically dominant to where monarchies began to rule a centralized state. Much of people's thought and culture transitioned from being religiously based to more secular, and the political arena came to be dominated by kings and rulers. Conflict between France and Italy also seemed to cause any religious thought to be overpowered, as more concern was placed on who was going to rule over who was going to take over what land, etc. Religion did not disappear completely, however, as Renaissance thinkers loved when humanistic works, such as those from Plato, synchronized with Christian teachings. Renaissance art often depicted Christian figures, as evident by the Madonnas and frescoes of Raphael, the sculpture of David, and the Sistine Chapel frescoes of Michelangelo. In the Northern Renaissance, the invention of the printing press by Johann Gutenberg, as well as the ideas, beliefs, and works of the humanist Erasmus, laid the foundation for the Reformation. The Age of Reformation, which was very much religiously based, also had ties to politics. The Reformation was happening during a time where European nation-states in favor of conforming and centralized government were emerging, and their ideals were conflicting with villages and towns that were previously self-governed. Conflict first broke out in Germany and Switzerland. Political, social, and religious life became intertwined through the printing press as messages could get to the masses. A pamphlet which praised freedom of religion was printed, and that same Protestant sermon had said it would ensure political liberation for peasants. Therefore, the printing press was a social aspect that changed Europeans' lives through increased communication and literacy, and ultimately led to the spread of popular religious and political movement. The criticism of the church had been due to the lay people learning more about the world from the printing press and postal system. In 1521, major movements in the religious realm occurred. A list of 102 oppressive burdens carried out by the church had been presented to the emperor by German nobility at the Diet of Worms. Another prominent player in the religious movement was Martin Luther, who showed discontentment for the Catholic Church by nailing his 95 Theses to a cathedral door. Luther made two main points. One was that a person's belief in God is justified by faith alone, and the other was his protest toward the sale of indulgences. Indulgences were payments that Christians could make to be absolved of their sins, but it was basically just a way for the church to make money. Luther was called to defend and later rescind his ideas at the Diet of Worms as well. He ended up being placed on an imperial ban. However, even though Luther was banned, his ideas would remain, and reforms quickly spread. At one point, the peasants started a revolution regarding political and economic rights, as well as the belief that they should be free from serfdom. They had attempted to use Lutheran ideals in support of their uprisings, but Lutherans condemned their uprisings as unchristian. In the 1530s, the Reformation continued. Protestant lands formed the Schmalkaldic League in preparation for a war against the Catholic Emperor. At the Diet of Augsburg in 1531, Protestant and Catholic representatives discussed the religious division, and the Emperor ruled that Protestant lands were to revert back to Catholicism. This was an unrealistic order. Protestantism continued to spread through education and new freedoms in some land. In 1555, the Peace of Augsburg declared that the ruler of each land would determine its religion, but the peace was still not extended to Calvinism and Anabaptism. Reformation also continued elsewhere and included the Swiss, Genevan, and English Reformations. A counter-reformation was even sparked within the Catholic Church, where a radical Catholic group known as the Jesuits was formed. The main event during the counter-reformation was the Council of Trent, in which the Catholic Church held meetings to analyze their own wrongdoings and revise their ideals. There ended up being little change, and pluralism in religion endured. The Age of Religious Wars began with the French Wars of Religion and were ultimately sparked by Henry II's death. The Bourbons, Montmorency, Châtillon, and Guises were all influential families in different regions of France who sought to gain control of the entire country after his death. The Bourbons and Montmorency Châtillon families had sympathy for French Protestants, also known as Huguenots, but the Guise families had deep roots in Catholicism. Huguenots were dominant in only a few areas of France, making up only 1/15 of the population, but 2/5 of the aristocracy. Calvinism also became an increasingly popular religion in opposition to the Guises. Calvinism and Huguenots ultimately led to French political decentralization. When Catherine de' Medici came to power as a regent, she sought Protestants as allies. She announced a January edict to grant Protestants the freedom to worship in public, but a massacre of Protestants in 1562 by the Duke of Guise occurred, and out of fear, Catherine aligned herself with the Catholic Guises, later supporting the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, where 3,000 Huguenots were killed in Paris and 20,000 more were killed throughout France within 3 days. Protestant resistance continued when Henry III took the French crown in 1574. In 1576, the Peace of Bayeux once again gave Huguenots religious freedoms. Many others within France, however, protested this, and the Peace of Bayeux was retracted in 1577. Religious conflict continued through the rise to power of Henry IV of Navarre. In 1598, he finally gave the Protestants rights that would last with the Edict of Nantes. Philip II of Imperial Spain had ruled Bohemia, Austria, Hungary, and Castile, Spain. Castile was very wealthy, had a high population, and a strong military and bureaucracy. This allowed Spain to defeat the Turks and later conquer Portugal, earning them access to even more land. However, when Philip tried to express power over the Netherlands, he was unsuccessful, and William of Orange led a revolt in which the pacification of Ghent, an alliance between Catholic and Protestant provinces, had defeated Spain, resulting in the Perpetual Edict, where Spain withdrew themselves from the Netherlands. Spain also had conflict with England. Mary Tudor took the throne in 1553 and reverted England to Catholicism. Great amounts of Protestants were executed under her reign. When Elizabeth I took the throne in 1558, she wanted to maintain peaceful relationships between religions and rescinded most of the anti-Protestant laws Mary had established. When Spain sent an armada into England in 1588, England swiftly defeated Spain. 1/3 of Spanish fleets would not return home. This political battle gave religious confidence to Protestant citizens for resistance. The last war in the Age of Religious Wars was the 30 Years' War. The first cause was the fact that Germany was decentralized, disunited, and vulnerable. There was also still equal division between Protestants and Catholics in the Holy Roman Empire. Frederick III formed a strong Protestant alliance, and the Duke of Bavaria responded with a Catholic counter-alliance. All of these factors set the stage for war. There are 4 stages to the war: the Bohemian, Danish, Swedish, and Swedish-French phases. The Bohemian phase began with the defenestration of Prague, where Bohemian nobility protested Ferdinand by throwing his representatives out of a castle window. At the Battle of White Mountain, Ferdinand successfully took hold of Bohemia, re-Catholicized the land, and conquered Palatine. During the Danish phase, Maximilian I of Bavaria defeated the Protestant Christian IV of Denmark in Germany. The Protestant Union dissolved, and most of Europe fell to Ferdinand. The Edict of Restitution was established, confirming the Catholic win by reaffirming that Calvinism is illegal, reasserting Catholic safeguards in the Peace of Augsburg, and ordering Lutherans to return all acquired land since 1552. In the Swedish phase, Gustavus Adolphus II of Sweden was leader of Protestant forces as they entered the significant battle at Breitenfeld, where he used excellent military tactics to earn Protestant victories and regain much of the territory lost by the Protestant Union. The Battle of Lutzen marked the end of Adolphus's help to the Protestants, as he would be killed by Albrecht von Wallenstein in alliance with Ferdinand. Finally, during the Swedish-French period, the Peace of Prague marked a peace treaty where the German Protestant states came to an agreement with Ferdinand, ending the Edict of Restitution but re-establishing the Peace of Augsburg. Despite the treaty, Ferdinand continued to push Catholicism. The French entered the war, and the French, Swedish, and Spanish armies fought against Germany. Germany failed to fight back and suffered through depopulation. Up to 1/3 of Germany's population was killed in what is referred to as the worst European catastrophe since the plague. This would have had social and economic impacts as well, as labor, trade, and more would have been affected. The Treaty of Westphalia was signed in 1648, bringing peace to Europe as it reasserted that the ruler of a land dictates its religion, and it officially rescinded Ferdinand's Edict of Restitution. This new treaty recognized Calvinism as legal. The end results of the war were clear. The legal status of Protestantism was widened, the map of Europe was significantly changed. However, the war had devastating impacts in Europe as well, especially in Germany. To conclude, the late medieval period to the end of the 17th century was marked by many political, social, economic, and religious changes in people's lives. Thanks for watching.